Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, both live and online. My name is Paolo Volpin, and I am the Dean of the Business School, or Bayes Business School, and I'm also a Professor of Finance here. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening to the inaugural Portal Trust Lecture. Thank you so much for coming. After a period where it has been more challenging than usual to see each other in person, it's wonderful to see many of you here, so thank you. Tonight, we hear from Diane Lees, CBE, Director General of the Imperial War Museum. I'm delighted to welcome Ms. Lees to deliver the Portal Trust Lecture this evening. Ms. Lees' lecture is entitled Creating Better Global Citizens, Museums and Their Role in Building a Better Future. I think we have all considered how we can be better citizens in a fast-moving and ever-evolving world, particularly in the last 18 months. And I very much look forward to listening to her thoughts on the role of museums in doing that. And I personally greatly missed my visits to museums while they were closed, and I'm so pleased we can all once again be educated by these great institutions. As many of you will know, the Sir John Cass Foundation was officially relaunched as the Portal Trust earlier this year. And this change extends beyond the Portal Trust. In September, we officially became Bayes Business School in line with our commitment to fostering and driving a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture, which is open to all. The name comes from Thomas Bayes, who was a mathematician who is best known for the theorem, the Bayes theorem, which suggests how to update our beliefs on the basis of new evidence. It is this idea, more than the person behind it, that is the motivation for adopting this name for us. The act of renaming the school reflects the three principles of Bayes Business School. We care, we learn, we act. We encourage boldness and curiosity, as well as having the courage to try new things, teaching our students how to think rather than what to think, while producing research that has real impact on business, society, and the environment. Our school mentoring program, in particular, of which we are very proud of, and is made possible thanks to the financial support from the Portal Trust, is an exemplar of collaboration and partnership. The program allows a deeper engagement with the community and develops our students' understanding of challenges faced in society, helping to develop their future careers. Equally important, though, is the support the program delivers to young people in London schools. Our purpose is to help individuals, firms, and industries grow and flourish by creating and sharing knowledge, inspiring continual learning and shaping practice, policy, and debate. We are constantly seeking new ways to serve both our potential and current students and to build an inclusive and diverse community, not just within these walls, but in the nation in which we reside and indeed around the world. Excellent teaching and world-class research are at the core of what we do at Bayes, encouraging innovative thinking that is rooted in the most up-to-date theory and practice, and that challenges how we think. So our motto of always learning is the cornerstone of all we do, and we want it to be imbued and championed by each and every person associated with the school. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome to Bayes this evening. And whether you're joining in person or online, I hope you enjoy your evening with us. So I would now like to welcome to the stage John Hall, the chairman of the Portal Trust, to say a few words on behalf of the organization before we hear from our main speaker. John, thank you.
Dean, thank you so much for your very warm words of welcome. The last time that you and I were standing here was indeed 2 years ago, this time of year. We'd no idea that a global pandemic was around the corner, thereby causing the postponement of what would have been last year's annual lecture. And here we are, as you said, for this inaugural annual lecture of the Portal Trust. We're delighted that everybody is here. We're delighted to welcome all of those who are on screen somewhere else. And of course, our experience is in no sense unusual. Around the world, there will be gaps of a year in those records that historians will look at in decades to come. Sometimes it used to be that an annual tournament of some kind was not held in 1941-42. There'll be these gaps of the long lists of events in which 2020, 21, and who knows how longer might be a gap in the future. Thankfully, we are able to resume this very evening. And as you described, Dean, since 2 years ago, your corporate name has changed, but the devotion of your team to excellence in advanced business education, research, can I use the word praxis, is it still current, is undimmed. Our name, as you said, has also changed. We are the Portal Trust, but our commitment to working with London's highly diverse young people to widen their educational experiences is as strong as ever. And both of us, as you said already, continue to encourage creativity and innovation in everything that we do. So it's an enormous pleasure for me and my colleagues from the board and staff of the Portal Trust to be here for this first annual lecture. Our lectures, for those of you who've been before, you know, introduce the audience to a distinguished lecturer who can challenge us to think beyond what we might call the daily experience of education that you might get if you're working in or a student in, pupil in formal education. Well, there are many, in fact, in the audience who have colleagues in City, and again, I can look and stare, which you won't be able to tell if you're online at home or somewhere, but colleagues we work very closely with, and certainly the mentoring program has delighted us as much as it has your colleagues here. And we hope that those who in the past have been working with us will want to continue to do so. So many relationships, as I look around, are very long established, although they don't all go back to 1748. And some of you might be thinking, as you look around, I haven't seen Richard Foley anywhere. Richard is known to everyone. He's our chief executive. And we have to say, very sorry you can't be here, Richard. He's recently had a hip operation, which is reason sufficient indeed for him not to be hopping around the Bayes Lecture Theatre. Anyway, I hope you get the feeling that we have a sense of adventure as the Portal Trust. I stop speaking now for, I think, a couple of minutes as we see what the sense of adventure implies.
The Portal Trust is here to open a door to life-changing opportunities for London's youth. Funding, supporting and contributing to organisations with big ideas for young people. Removing boundaries and helping us reach our potential. We can all achieve amazing things. Sometimes all we need is the opportunity. Change begins here. Find out how at portaltrust.org.
And thank you very much for that voiceover, which actually came from Peckham. So some of the young people you saw there will certainly be helping us to forge our new identity. I need to mention, Paolo, if I may, another notable change from 2 years ago, and that is that during the summer, and I'm moving from behind the screen as I say this, along with colleagues here at City, you welcomed Professor Anthony Finkelstein as your new president. and we look forward to hearing from him after the lecture and before our Q&As with our Deputy Chairman, Sophie Fernandez, who's sitting over there, and Diane as the speaker. Anyhow, you don't want any more of my speechifying. You do want to hear our lecturer. That's why we're here. And so it's with enormous pleasure that I welcome our distinguished lecturer this year, Diane Leese, CBE, the Director General of the Imperial War Museums, plural. Diane, you will remind us all of that, a remarkable national collection, and the Lambeth experience is but part of your remarkable offer. The Imperial War Museums, plural, are a remarkable group of innovative collections. Many of you will have maybe seen on television, or certainly read about your new galleries, which opened very recently. And if I can organize my week so I don't look for a Monday or Tuesday, I'm looking forward very much to coming to see them very soon. So that's 2 new floors with the Holocaust galleries and the Second World War galleries for us all to see, I hope. Diane's commitment to education is expressed in many more ways than the leadership, scholarship, research, and public exhibitions we associate with your work with the Imperial War Museums and those you worked with before that. Diane is also a Pro-Chancellor of the University of Lincoln and chairs its Board of Governors. So we were thrilled, Diane, when you accepted our invitation to give the annual lecture for what would have been last year's event. And today we're most grateful to you for keeping the faith, as it were, and your willingness to come along after this year's absence to give your lecture. Your title is Creating Global Citizens, Museums and Their Role in Building a Future. So those of you in the audience this evening, please welcome Diane. You're allowed to clap. Which is a very good thing. Those on screens, please stand by, be ready to have your slides adjacent to the lecture itself, so you should be able to watch the visual, what used to be called visual aids. Have you ever heard that expression in the last decade?
No, I'm too young.
No, quite, thank you. So please, if you aren't here, enjoy the lecture as if you were, because those of us who are here are looking forward very much indeed. Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and with a year's delay. I have to say, I've completely forgotten what it's like to stand up before an audience because I'm used to doing things on Zoom. So I have to prove that I am wearing shoes and not slippers, which has been my usual. And I was having this conversation of, I've had to do my hair in the round because I was just doing the front bits for Zoom. And now you can see the back. So welcome. It's great to see you all here. So let me get to some pretty pictures. So I think we could probably all describe what we think a museum is. We visit them regularly. And before COVID, there were over 85 million visits a year, which is double the number of attendances at football matches in the UK. We would probably say that they display things, that they create exhibitions and have events. But do we truly know what they really do? In 2019, there are an estimated 3,000 museums in the UK. Of these, 1,722 are accredited, i.e. officially recognised by the Arts Council. And you need to be an accredited museum if you want to apply for funding streams like the National Lottery. That's 1,722. Don't worry, there won't be a test later. The 1,722 breaks down into the national museums, who are established by Act of Parliament. 15 are funded by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. That's 5 in Scotland, 7 in Wales, 4 in Northern Ireland, and 3 by the Ministry of Defence. 800 museums are actually charitable trusts or community interest companies, and about 517 are local authority funded. In addition to that, there are 153 National Trust museums, 79 university museums, and 64 military or regimental museums. And whilst they are all different in some ways, they hold collections for the public benefit. And that's normally education, which of course is what we're here to talk about tonight. So The Museums Association definition is that museums enable people to explore collections for inspiration, learning, and enjoyment. They make accessible artifacts and specimens which they hold in trust for society. Currently, there is a professional discussion about this definition led by the International Council of Museums. The desire is to create a statement which encapsulates a move to more social relevance and societal impact, and that's on the part of all museums. The language of these debates has polarized views on whether museums are about collections or about communities, an argument which does little to help those coming into the sector or engaging with museums. It's an argument which seeks to badly define what a good museum should do. We're about working with our remit, our collections and our audiences to get the best long-term impact for the investment of what looks like considerable amounts of public and private money. Behind these somewhat, let's have another picture. Any guesses? This is Beamish. So for those of you who are outside London. Behind these somewhat academic debates, there's been a real sea change in the way that museums interpret the term education or learning. The term learning now covers everything from research, partnerships, public programs, public engagement, community engagement, and a whole range of other things. The activities range from single projects through to multi-year programs and are mostly about using collections with the public to create those good societal outcomes. These range from memory sessions for dementia patients through to revolutionary new swimsuits for Olympic swimmers, from understanding global conflict through to climate change. This work is about creating social awareness in new ways, which are firmly rooted in collections and research. This all must be done, of course, in the context of reduced funding and continued attacks on the value of arts education in this country. The Creative Industries Federation states that the UK creative industries were worth 115.9 billion GVA, and that the sector was growing by 4 times the rate of the UK economy in 2019. Yet investment in our museums has dropped significantly since 2010, with some museums in the Midlands, for example, losing 70% of their local authority funding. And our future workforce is also under threat. Current attitudes towards the perception of low-value degrees in the arts and humanities and the emphasis on STEM for T-levels are going to reduce the number of people seeking careers in the museum industry. But against all of this, rather than sitting back and bemoaning their condition, most museums have moved into new ways of working with their collections and audiences and creating new ways of funding them. The purpose of IWM is to enable the public to explore the causes, the course, and the consequences of modern conflict. Our educational mission is to enable global citizens who understand conflicts from around the world today because they understand the history behind them. The world is by no means a peaceful place, and museums can have a central role in making sense of what's happening today from the evidence of what's happened in the past. It is this evolution that is at the heart of the so-called culture wars. But the central idea that history is subject to constant re-evaluation and reinterpretation as more evidence comes to light should not be seen as threatening. It adds to traditional narratives and knowledge rather than erasing them. It is simply a process of enlightenment about all narratives rather than a select few, and we should celebrate our ability to absorb these multiple views. Trevor Phillips' 3 principles for introducing a rigorous and non-partisan approach to institutions' decision-making about this reinterpretation of history are a welcome tool to move us beyond the unhelpful and destructive culture wars narrative. Given the fact that museums are often trusted by the general public, today's curators shoulder a huge responsibility to be much more publicly accountable. They are expected and should be balanced and empathetic towards multiple audiences. It's not an easy task. For example, big narratives like the Second World War are hard to deliver with nuance and sensitivity for multiple experiences. It is, however, universally established that the increased use of personal stories in our museums has allowed multiple voices to be heard without having to expand the weight of that big narrative. For example, we have a collection of uniform and documents from a Second World War pilot who was killed in a raid on Germany. We even have his front door key, which makes a poignant reminder of that expectation of returning home safely. This has meant that using these stories, we can introduce a diversity of voices, be it class, gender, ethnicity, orientation, etc., and that those stories can be present without fuss or mediation. At IWM, we try to ensure that the contributions of the whole empire are represented, but unfortunately, those stories were not systematically collected in the past, and we are currently seeking more material to enhance a more rounded and complete narrative. Increasingly, many civic museums in the UK are thinking about their roles in the context of other community agendas. Traditional regional collections, mostly with Victorian origins, cover subjects such as art and design, ceramics, natural history, what we used to call ethnography, archaeology, etc., and have, as you would expect, become centered on telling global stories to local audiences. There is nothing intrinsically wrong with that. These are amazing collections, in some cases of better quality than those in some of our national museums. It is their environment and the audience of these museums that has changed. Museums are now showing objects to the communities whose ancestors originated them. The growth of the post-empire diaspora means that what you share with whom is very different from the principles embedded in Prince Albert's Great Exhibition. These grand projects in history were about demonstrating the innovation and power of the empire. This change to being community first has created new ways of engaging local audiences in places where domestic and international tourism is not strong. The new Museum of Making in Derby is a perfect example of a project that brings that demonstrates Derby's central role in huge innovation during the Industrial Revolution and how it can be made a source of pride and inspiration to its current population. In addition, high quality research collaborations are at the heart of new ways of creating audiences that are more aware of nuances of debates around current issues. For example, IWM London season on refugees, For example, the IWM London season on refugees from war brought together research from 7 different universities. Covering everything from migration journeys through to demographics, the museum was uniquely placed to add the historic dimension to the current crisis. Evidence of war refugees from Belgium in the First World War, the kinder transport from the Second World War, and Syrian refugees from the recent conflict was added from material represented in the museum's collections. This put current debates around refugees in both a historic and contemporary context. Our current research projects include, for example, mental health and war. They're also funded through research councils and will result in the production of new exhibitions in the coming years. Other museums, of course, are working in similar ways on things like sustainable energy, climate change, agricultural technology, and many, many more subjects. These collaborations result in creating opportunities to share with audiences groundbreaking research in a way that enables them to have a more rounded view of the issues and to be able to translate them into meaningful ways to make a difference. When these projects work, they do make better global citizens, expanding the lens and showing how our own contribution to action or change can have true impact. The Natural History Museum in London had a research collaboration with the swimwear company Speedo. You might be wondering where this example is going. The scientists at the museum were conducting research into the evolution and design of the skin of sharks. This resulted in a new material which replicated the abilities of sharks to move through water at speed and was turned into bodysuits for swimmers. It was incredibly successful. The suits measurably increased the distance time of the swimmers. But unfortunately, they were subsequently banned in competition because they gave an unfair advantage to those who were in the Speedo suits. and not to the others. Brokering relationships between communities is another way in which museums can contribute to a more peaceful society. IWM had a series of conflict cafes throughout our Syrian exhibition, and this invited refugees and journalists and filmmakers to talk to the public about their views on the Syrian conflict and allowed difficult questions about migration, war, survival to be asked in a safe space. Other examples include Luton museums, who have an incredible collection of tuk-tuks. And they have used those in an amazing project with to look at, hold conversations about Asian heritage with other Luton residents as part of a series of events to promote a cohesive community. In Nottingham, the National Justice Museum works with young people at risk of offending to reduce crime rates and runs a mock trials programme which explains the justice system to those who encounter it. In Liverpool, the National Museums Liverpool have created a project called House of Memories. It's an NHS commissioned programme to work with Liverpool residents with dementia. This multi-award winning project has now been running for 10 years and has a sustained set of impacts for its audience. This shows how museums are working for long-term outcomes for its programmes rather than short-term popular hits. There has been a real change in terms of an injection from the multi-arts professionals within the sector. Museums are expanding what they do to encompass dance, drama, and music in order to appeal to non-traditional museum audiences. For example, the First World War Centenary's partnership, IWM's partnership, God, too many words, sorry, I'll start that one again. For example, the First World War Centenary, IWM's partnership with 1418 Now, saw the commissioning of an opera, a ballet, and this, which is Jeremy Deller's masterpiece, We Are Here Because We're Here, on the 100th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme in 2016. From 7 p.m. in the morning, First World War soldiers started appearing at train stations, shopping centres, or parks around the UK, and numbers built over the day, as did the First World War casualties at the battle. None of the soldiers spoke, but instead handed out a small card with the name and the regiment of a soldier who died on the first day of battle. People were really incredibly moved by this human memorial. And at Waterloo Station, normal commuters, I was there, it was unbelievably hilarious because commuters do not make eye contact and they ignore everything that's going off around them. So watching this develop over the day was just an incredible experience. So they started, ignoring a small number of uniformed men that infiltrated the concourse. But as numbers grew, it was clear something really important was happening. By the end of the day, the soldiers amazingly across the UK had interacted with 2 million people and 12 million people followed online. And this project was not announced as being by Jeremy Deller and Rufus Norris until the evening news. And it was an incredible success. So changing the way we think about using arts, performance, etc., brought the story of the Battle of the Somme to new audiences. The Ballet Boys created a new ballet called Young Men, first performed at Sadler's Wells. The choreographer used IWM's film archive showing shell shock as an inspiration for exploring the impact of the First World War. The performances and the subsequent film had an audience of over 500,000. IWM has gained a great deal of confidence in using multiple art forms from its experience of the First World War Centenary, and its latest seasons have had performance and music as part of their programming, from the music of resistance through to a Syrian death metal band. Not seen that kind of visitor in the Imperial War Museum, but it was an extraordinary event. It is the museum's responsibility to maximize the use of its collections and to use them in ways which create a bridge between the old and the new. For this, for IWM, this idea culminated in the creation of Peter Jackson's film, They Shall Not Grow Old, a play on the words of the Binyan poem. We knew from intensive research that younger potential audiences do not engage with grainy black and white film images. They quickly switch off from what they're seeing. We needed a way to bring this really groundbreaking historical film to new audiences. The film, which takes oral testimony and 100-year-old black and white film from the museum's collections and creates a full color 4K digitally restored production specifically designed for that audience. It's now had 300 million views worldwide. And this is an example, I think, of the ability of museums to power up and use collections in a new way. And I'm just going to run, if I may, a trailer.
Ready, fire!
Good luck, lads. Here it's them. Well done.
The other revolution that museums have faced in recent years, and has obviously been brought into sharp focus during COVID, is using our content on digital platforms. For example, at IWM, this has led to major changes in the way it creates learning opportunities for all. Our conflict of interest is a brand new podcast series from the IWM Institute. Over 7 episodes, we unpacked some of the world's most complex conflicts, from the Yugoslav wars to the ongoing war in Syria. Celebrity guests asked the simple questions about the most pressing conflicts of our time. What's really going on in Yemen? How did the war in Afghanistan begin? What do we mean by the troubles in Northern Ireland? Guided by an IWM curator, our guest is taken on a journey through the Imperial War Museum in London, discovering the objects, people, and stories which bring whatever conflict it is to life. And amazingly, I'm not very socially media active, but this is one of the things that our team claims. Amazingly, one of our podcasts stayed a week at the top of the Spotify listing. I'm told that's a good thing. So I do want to talk a little bit about schools at this point, because there is an assumption that museums do schools, but they don't do everything else. So the museum always wants to make sure that our on-site learning was not about replicating the classroom experience in the museum. We have a program called Documentary Challenge, which works on mobile phones. Each team of 3 students takes part of producer, presenter, and camera operator, and their task is to make a documentary focusing on an object of their choice from the galleries whose story they feel needs to be told. And this gives the team complete control. They are instructed by text message when to move on to the next tasks, and the end result is downloaded to the school to be used in follow-up work. And the feedback from teachers and pupils has been extraordinary. Now, as we know, COVID forced many schools to close or to teach mostly online. And IWM and several other museums joined forces with BBC Bitesize to provide online learning resources. IWM's Empire and Conflict series has had 1.3 million downloads and was the most used resource on the site. It has 2 elements. Firstly, continuing professional development for teachers, and secondly, resources for pupils. Taking this model and creating a new international digital learning hub is our next big idea. We want to create a learning hub which covers conflict from around the world, from our international and national partners, at a single point of access. It would include how to teach difficult narratives, including the Holocaust, and include newly digitized film, photography, and sound material for all to use in all sorts of settings. Of course, this is only currently an aspiration. It would need massive financial input up front to get content digitalized and edited to the right standards, and to create the context for materials to be to fit multiple curriculums and keywords. In a creative world, this could be funded by a content levy on broadband infrastructure companies whose business models are based on increasing user time online and for using increasing amounts of content. So of course, this is not going to be a favorite idea of mine for the companies, But as yet, there are no major funding streams available to unlock this huge resource. And the fact that some of these companies are incentivized with public money to tackle issues around rural digital poverty should, in my view, encourage some kind of giving back. So digital programming has expanded our work to those who may never visit one of our museums. It's also strengthened our role in soft power. This is obviously before COVID. So we have partnerships in China, in Belarus, in Mauritius, in Jamaica, in Malawi, in India, Pakistan, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the list goes on. Digital gives us an opportunity to share more across the globe in a more cost-effective and deep digital way, sharing both programming and collections. And it should have a real impact on different communities with shared histories. Our project in Mauritius, for example, is about curatorial and collection support for the development of their Second World War galleries. Their galleries will tell the story of their role in this part of their history for the very first time. So, returning to the title of this lecture, I hope I've demonstrated that museums can help create global citizens who are more aware of their impact on the world, have developed the ability to question single point narratives, i.e. to see the issue from multiple sides, and have been supported in an exploration of their identity. In working in creative and inspirational ways, our museums are helping to build a better future. And I hope you've been inspired by the way your museums are moving away from just places to visit on a rainy day, although we really welcome you doing that too. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to thank Diane for a really fascinating and rich account of the work, of her work and the work of museums. My name is Anthony Finkelstein. I'm the president of City University of London, and I'm a relatively recent arrival. So John already trailed that. I've been in place for about 3 months and have, it says here that I'm enjoying myself, but whether my colleagues are enjoying it quite as much remains to be seen. So museums share a lot with universities, not least in finding themselves sometimes at the uncomfortable sharp end of headlines. But that's perhaps a good moment for us as educational and cultural institutions to reflect on our role and purpose in the world. And that very much thematically emerged in your lecture. I was particularly interested in how you talked about the creation of global citizens and about how educational outreach, innovative programming, developing of creativity, and the use of technology, perfectly exemplified by that amazing example with the mobile phones, shows exactly that. So I think that universities like City have a very aligned role to play. City's identity is focused on business and the professions, on our idea of ourselves as a professional school oriented to giving transformational outcomes for our students. And exactly in the same way as museums are developing, we're learning much more about how we have to listen and engage with, in our case, those who study, research and work with us, as you are doing precisely with your audiences. So I think there's something quite rich for us to collectively build on. And I look forward very much to the questions that will emerge. I'd like very much to thank our friends at the Portal Trust. I mean, you know who your friends are when you go through tough times together, actually. And let's be clear, you know, it's been a tough time, and we really appreciate the long-standing relationship we've had with the Trust. A further 3 years of funding for the school's mentoring program and your continued support of the university and our business school. These are really appreciated. I've been given the privilege of announcing, no sooner have you finished than I announce the next lecture to be delivered by Professor Rosie Meek from Royal Holloway, University of London, on the topic of supporting prisoner education and well-being. I look forward to me trying to extend dodgy analogies on that occasion as well. And I hope to see you all again for this.